Welcome to the Awaken Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. Get ready to create magic and miracles as you lean into your heart's desires. I believe not only does the heart want what it wants, but it knows. This show is a weekly deep dive into what it means to live from an awakened heart. I'll be sharing inspiring stories and real conversations with people just like you, who have turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. My mission is to show you how you too can be connected and heart-centered in every area of your life. Your journey to aligning with more love, more joy, and your wildest dreams come true starts now. Welcome back, my friends, to the Awaken Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. And here we are, November. And today's episode is kind of an extension on what the previous episode was about. Awakened heart, when we think about that. It is all the things we talk about, awakened heart and heart energy and listening to intuition, following the impulse, the call of your heart, and getting out of the, craziness of your mind and becoming something better because of your being intuitively guided. Awakened heart and an awakening also has to do with what is happening now in our world. Every country, every place on this planet is going through a great awakening. With everything that has happened over the last 20 months, people are beginning to wake up and really see what is happening, how much they have been lied to, how everyone's been so busy and oblivious to all the wrongdoings that have been happening beneath the surface for a very long time. And awakening is not very pretty, and it can be very, very confusing. And you have to question everything that you once believed in and have the courage to really open up and maybe let go of those things that you thought were correct and that you might have based all your beliefs on, and have compassion for the person you once were, because it's quite shocking to see what has been happening and having no awareness of it. And there's many of us, like last episode with Michelle Sorrow, who awakened herself and now is committed to helping others on their path to awakening and speaking her truth and helping others speak their truth, because, this is all about unity. We need to all come together regardless of race, religion, skin color, pigment color, sexual identity, and really unite, because when we unite together as one human race, one human species, we can get rid of this darkness really pretty fast. And I really believe we've already won. And, the darkness is just shaking itself out and the light will prevail over that. So today's guest, I really enjoyed having this conversation. It was a lot of fun. Amy Main, I've known her for years. We used to work in Hollywood together. Amy is a super talented artist who decided to give back and lend a voice to those who have been seriously adversely affected by the vaccination, the COVID vaccination, and those who have died because of it. And COVID Victims Portraits was born. Amy Main is a former Hollywood actress and writer. Amy, as she says, she escaped LA in 2017 after an awakening through alcohol and health struggles. She is a painter, student of esoterics, a staunch defender of freedom for all living beings, and a citizen of the world. She currently resides in Mexico, where she continues doing self-work and growing deeper through relationships. She runs the Instagram page COVID Victims Portraits, a platform dedicated to raising awareness around vaccine, injury, and death. I really think you're going to enjoy this conversation. We do talk about what's going on in the world right now as far as what's going on with these vaccines and how many people are being really adversely injured by it, and how there's so much gaslighting happening to the people that are dying and being injured, and how much of this is a power grab that has been planned for a very, very long time, and we cannot let them win. And we also talk about Hollywood, because we both worked in Hollywood, and really through Awakening, you understand how much there is a dark underbelly that underlays throughout the whole city and the entertainment industry. talk about also, mind control and MK Ultra and all these things that people like slander as conspiracy theories, which are actually the truth. And conspiracy theories are like a slander for the purpose of making it sound like people are tinfoil hat wearers. But a conspiracy isn't a conspiracy when it actually comes true. So if you're just beginning to question things, how things just don't add up, they don't seem right, you got this little nudge in your belly saying, I don't think so. You know what? You're going to really enjoy this conversation and conversations like these. So sit back, enjoy this conversation with Amy Main. Hey, Amy, welcome to the Awaken Heart podcast.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you so much for having me on.
So you're coming all the way from Mexico, and we're going to get into some really amazing conversation regarding the craziness that is happening in the world and what led you to what you're doing now to help all these, we're going to go into the vaccines, of course, all that, but how you're helping all these victims, really showing their story and really, highlighting their struggles. And you're an artist and how you're using your artistry to help these victims and showcase and bring awareness to what is happening in the world. And we know a lot is happening in the world. It seems like it keeps on dragging when you tune into it, it's like, what the heck is going on? It's upside down world. So before we dive into that, so I've known Amy for, I don't know, maybe 20 years. I think 20 years. Yeah. And we were in Los Angeles and we worked in entertainment, and we worked for a company called Extra Extra mainly. And so Allison Waters, if you're listening, so they used to book us a lot on commercials. We worked sad background on commercials. So we would work like the 18, we would work 5-7 days a week, 10 days in a row. It was so much fun. And so we were on the fringes of entertainment, and Amy was the Wendy's girl. So she had a nice gig at for a while. So you spent long hours on sets. We made amazing friendships, and it was such a great living. But Amy was one of the few that I've seen, because there's only so far you can get with that when you're soul, you need to grow a little bit. So Amy was one who started writing blogs, and she's a published author, and she went around, you were testing out Bumble or Tinder or that dating apps.
It was Tinder at the time. Yeah. Bumble had was just appearing on the scene. So Tinder was like the heavy hitter at the time. That tells you how long ago this was. But yeah, I did. It was called 40 Dates and 40 Nights. And it was my own, I could really sense that there was something wrong with how I was approaching dating and how I was just sort of giving too much of myself to each guy that I met. And it was like, I actually had seen, this is so funny to think back on this, but I had seen a comedy show where they did 3 live dates on stage, and then they were kind of coaching him in between. I was like, oh, I could do something like that. I could do 40 dates in 40 days, and I could just blog it and be my own coach and kind of see what's going on. It was a crazy idea and crazier execution, but really fun. And I would say that was really the catalyst into the next chapter of my life. I mean, at that time if you go back and read it, I was still very much in the scene and alcohol and all this stuff, but you could see the emergence of somebody who was trying to break out of that social conditioning, right? So for a while I was very oh my God, that guy looks so silly in that book. But now I can really appreciate it as sort of starting to blossom into myself. And then after that, I really I stopped drinking completely. I moved to New York as a result of that book. And that really pushed me over the edge with drinking. I knew I needed to stop. Once I stopped that, and then I cleaned up my diet and cleaned up everything, it was an explosion in my brain happened. So it was just, that would be the first sort of spiritual awakening I had. It was in the desert by myself, very, it was just all of a sudden everything, associations were just happening on every level, right? And I was just consuming as much as I could of esoteric literature, and I was just having my mind blown. At the same time, I felt I was trying to tell people about what I was going through. I was so excited about it, and people were just looking at me you're nuts. I was on set And like each person I would talk to, I'm like, do you know like this and this? And they're like, I started to sound like, what was his name? Was it Rick? Who was the chemtrail guy that like,
I don't know. Somebody
Rick
from
Rhodes.
background?
Yeah, I think it was Rick Rhodes might have been the guy.
Okay.
Yeah, there was one guy on set who was always going off about the chemtrails and like everybody's like, oh man, that guy. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, he knew something I didn't know. But I was like, to me, it was like I actually discovered the conspiracy and the spiritual at the same time. And I could really see that there was a divide in those two spaces that really needed to be blended together. And I think COVID has been the catalyst to put those sides together, because now it's like, I mean, it's really interesting. Like a lot of the people that I would have thought would have like been against this are not. Like they've really gone into the polarity of the left-right divide, which is just obviously ridiculous. But I think, yeah, it was a tricky time. And then that was like, once I had that, then I started my other blog, and it was interesting because I was talking so openly about all this stuff. I would go, you know, it was a travel blog because I was like, one year I was in 18 countries, and it was so much fun just like talking about my travels, but at the same time, like injecting little bits and pieces of the stuff that I was really excited about. And so, but I had no fear about it. It's like, I could talk about 9/11. I could talk about JFK. Like I called myself openly a conspiracy theorist, like joking about it, because I didn't like, it just, people were open to those ideas at that time. I was not prepared for the level of psychological warfare that was going to happen that would make it like shut down all conversation.
What's happening now is shutting down all conversation.
Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you were saying that you had an awakening on both sides. So spiritual and conspiracy, which conspiracy, what is that in quotation marks, is it's really not. It's like truth in plain
Breathe
sight.
together. Breathe together is literally what conspire means.
Exactly. So you had that double whammy at the same time.
Yeah.
So people like me have been on the spiritual path for years. And this, you know, COVID, I call it the COVID shit show, is what really opened my eyes in this last election and everything. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of people, because you see a lot of people in the health and wellness field, you know, doctors that are being paid by big pharma, nurses, practitioners, epidemiologists, all these people that are like seeing it at the same time. And they're really toting for like, hey, you know, natural health, and hey, open your eyes, look what's going on here. And then the media is just vilifying them completely. And we're seeing so much of that happening now. And you went through this like when COVID happened.
2015 was like when this started. So it's like that first election cycle with Hillary and Trump. Yeah. And I was I like knew all the stuff with the Clintons and like I'd been following the Epstein stuff really closely. And then there was the Julian Assange WikiLeaks, and I was following the real time and watching as Pizzagate and fake news literally emerged on like the same day. And I was just like, whoa, this is crazy. And meanwhile, we're in like super liberal LA, and all my friends are like, you have to vote for Hillary. So anyways, that was kind of like the beginning. And then watching what's happened in 2020, it's next level.
Oh my gosh. So you've seen, I don't know how I would have my sanity. I mean, maybe I would have gotten through it, because it seems like there's a process where, okay, open the eyes. Oh my God, let me curl in a ball in the corner, and like fear and anger and all that. Maybe I would have gotten through that sooner. I think I've finally pulled through that. I started this podcast literally at the beginning of this pandemic. So throughout all my episodes, it's seen me processing what's going on here. And yeah, the whole my sister was awake. She's been awake a long time. I think she even started waking up around Ronald Reagan when he was in office, and she just knew a lot of stuff. And I'd hear little bits and pieces from her. And when I go visit my family, like my older sister's totally indoctrinated her children, and they had like Hillary on TV, and my sister's just younger sisters looking at the TV like, Hillary. And my other sister would get mad, and they get in arguments, and I'm like Pollyanna. I'm like, I don't want to know anything. I don't need to know anything. Now I'm like, know everything.
I'm doing self-work.
And you see so many people like, I don't really have a lot of, I mean, I guess everyone wakes at their own time, but then people are just refusing to see this. People in the health community that are afraid of losing followers, not speaking their truth, and not being authentic. And I can see right through that. And it's also like, you and I being in Hollywood, the symbolism, like we are so lucky. Think about the situations and we have gotten ourselves into in Hollywood. Like there's a
Oh.
darkness. There is such a darkness to that city. Like I felt it a couple years before even moving, and I finally moved away from there. And I think I popped through LA one day and I was like, oh my God, the energy of the city. We see symbolism. So there's symbolism everywhere. You've been awake to this a lot longer. Can you give a brief, I don't know,
Sure.
introduction or a summation of what is going on underneath Hollywood and how everything is in plain sight? Like how
Yeah, well,
they,
let me start with when I first moved to
okay.
LA, and I was only 18, and I got a job working as a hostess on Sunset Boulevard. And within, I would say, a month of working there, I was approached by a quote manager. And he basically tried to groom me into a escort ring that was part of Ron Burkle and like Paris Hilton, that crew.
Mm.
I had so much shame around it. Uh, in fact, I talk openly about it, but I haven't really talked publicly about it because it still it's just so dark. And at the time, like I felt, when you're 18, you just moved to LA. I was like, I'm an adult, I'm a woman. And I didn't really see how young and innocent and impressionable I was. Like I thought I was in control of myself. And so like I could sort of see what he was doing, but I had this dream of acting, and he was playing on it, and he was like
Mm.
introducing me to certain people high up, and like, I'll get you these, I'll get you into these rooms and everything. Meanwhile, there was this very strange sexual element, and I could see that something was going on. Like I knew in my heart, like my intuition was telling me this is not good news. Anyways, cut to him like flying me out to Nevada with this like high roller, and like there was an expectation of sex. I didn't go through with it. It was the
Mm.
end of it, but it was like very clear in that moment like what that all was about. And so that was my initial trauma. And then years later, when I realized that that had been actually like pretty much a grooming into the MK Ultra cult that is Hollywood.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so if I had gone along with it, who knows where I'd be, but like I couldn't give myself like that. But that got me really, once I started to really wake up, I started to investigate MK Ultra heavily, which a lot of, if your viewers are interested, I recommend looking at Vigilant Citizen. I recommend the books by Fritz Springmeier. Kathy O'Brien talks a lot about it. It's the CIA mind control program that was carried over from Nazi Germany. And it's probably still going on today in one of its many iterations. But basically what we're seeing right now is a global mind control. So like there's all these different tactics that are used, but symbolism is sort of at the base of all of this, right? And so it's like there's an initial trauma wound or like some kind of trauma, and then they like are subconsciously feeding you things. So this is what's happened with COVID. It's like this
Mhm.
lockdown, this separation. It's very classic narcissistic abuse, separating you and then love bombing you. But with Hollywood, it's really steeped in the occult. So it's not just like some psychological tricks. We're talking about like dark occult practices.
Mhm.
um, and it's hard for people to grasp, and it's still something that I don't usually get into right away with people, because I think that immediately puts people off. Like you start talking about black magic and people are like, oh, that's hocus pocus. No, it's not. Like they
Mm.
really know what they're doing. And if you look at the roots of like Aleister Crowley, and even like Vigilant Citizen does a really good job with Marilyn Monroe and dissecting her story. But it's like, okay, so you have Norma Jean, and then you have her introduced to oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name, the Church of Satan guy. Starts with an A, not Aleister
Mm.
Crowley, but one of these other guys who was like very, he had an important part in Hollywood back in that day. And he was kind of the one who introduced her onto the scene, changed her name, which is like an aspect of like occult transformation, dye the hair, like do all of these things, and then turn you into a Hollywood slave. And so she
Mhm.
was kind of a early version of that. But where am I going with all of this? After I started to wake up and really see all of the symbolism, it was impossible for me to even like drive on Melrose Boulevard without just being like in shock at how blatant It all was. It was like every Netflix billboard. The one that I will never forget, because it was like the cannibalism thing was coming onto the scene. You know, there was like the whole Reddit thing with Spez, and he had been controlling the cannibalist group. I don't know if any of your followers are like really avid conspiracy followers. They know what I'm talking about. But basically, I was in Berlin for the Berlin Film Festival, and there was a huge Netflix billboard, and it was for that Drew Barrymore show, the one of Santa, like the Santa Clarita Diet, and it's just a severed finger with a fork in it, and that was the entire billboard. And like that was so mind blowing to me, how obvious they were showcasing this like consumption of a human, right? You couldn't even tell that it was like zombie related, but I mean that's another thing we could get into, the zombies.
And everything that we've seen, like everything that's been showing through the years, like you might see, I think there was a clip about Lionheart, about everything that happened in Afghanistan, like word for word, like they're showing us in plain sight what they intend to happen or what the plan is.
Predictive programming. Yep. I mean, you can go, actually, YouTube has probably pulled down a lot of these videos to go to BitChute, but it's like some of these 9/11 programming videos, they're like 3 hours long, and it's just like shot after predictive shot after predictive shot. I mean, it goes on for hours. So yeah, I mean, Contagion, my partner and I rewatched that last year, and we were like jaws dropping on the floor, how obvious it was. And then did you see that Sanjay Gupta was actually an actor in that movie?
No.
Can't even pick this up. Oh, I'm so glad that Joe Rogan just like destroyed him the other day.
I'll have to tune that in. Joe Rogan's been on point. Yeah. And I appreciate that for someone that has such a huge audience to just like stand up to like the cancel culture and everyone like crucifying him. And he's just speaking his truth. So many people do bend to that. I just don't have respect for it at all. And so going back to like Hollywood, you know, you were 18, and when I first got there, I think I was 28, but I looked 18, and it's almost like,
oh yes, that's the other thing. I looked like I was 12.
Yes.
And then I realized, I was like, that's why I was prized, because people were constantly telling me. In fact, my first boyfriend in LA was like, oh, you look like a little 12-year-old.
And you're like, oh God, horror. That's why. No, they prey on it because there's a lot of pedophilia in Hollywood. It's a whole like ritualistic, sacrificial, and we're getting into some really dark stuff that like people in my audience might not be ready for. But when you are ready, I can provide the information. But you know, it's almost like there's an aura, like they can sniff out your innocence. And that's why it's so important when you go into that town to have grounding. Like I surrounded myself with really great friends right away. I mean, I've been in situations when I first moved out there, probably the first month or two, I think I met somebody. He like brought me on set to like, you know, showed me something on set. And then he asked me to go to, I think it was Alan Thicke. He was performing down in Orange County. He was in a play. So he brought me down there, and I probably looked like, oh, here's another young girl, you know, this guy is brought with him. I didn't know, I'm all innocent. And then ended up back at his house, and he's sitting on his bed, and I'm like, I gotta go. And luckily I was able to leave. I got myself out of that situation, but people get in that situation and it's a bad situation. So that's why I always feel like I've been guided, I've been protected, but it's so important to have really great friends. I have friends that I've had for over 20 years. We're still really close. But there's people that get into Hollywood and they get lost and they get eaten up, and they ended up in drugs, and it chews them up and spits them out. So
well, for sure, that was where my alcohol struggle came from. Like I was constantly, you know, trying to advance my career, but not in a sexual way, but like through networking. And it's like, I'm out having dinners with all of these producers and directors. And it's like, the only way I could even tolerate all the stuff that was going on was by numbing myself with alcohol. And so, yeah, of course, as soon as I stopped drinking, it was like, just, I couldn't avoid what was right in front of my face for so long. And that was, I couldn't stand any of the stuff that was happening there. And it was all just, you know, ridiculous conversations, and just, you know, this like, there's so much sex magic happening, and so much like sex power, like that's a whole nother topic we could get into. And I mean, Hollywood has really done a number on us in terms of our relationship to sex and what it what sex has the potential to be and what they've turned it into, this commodification. And it's really upsetting. And even, through several years of work through like Tantra practices, I'm still doing so much work around my own trauma in that area. So yeah. I mean, I'm grateful to Hollywood on some level because I needed to put myself there into the lion's den in order to really experience and come out of it, but it's a rough place. And I think only really high level spiritual beings can make it out, can make it there, be so successful and hold on to themselves. I couldn't even tell you who those people are. I don't know, but I'm sure they exist.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And there are some people that are like the people that really make it really huge. A lot of them have sold their souls and some of them haven't. And you can clearly see it now when you're awake to see what's happening. I lived in LA that whole time. I didn't know any of this. I didn't know any of it. I moved here 2 years ago. I was still like, collective consciousness, meditating, prayer. And I felt for 3 years I needed to get out of there. I'm like, ooh, this energy of the studio, you got to get out. And I lived at the beach then, which was like, and I didn't want to leave the beach area. I'm like, going to Hollywood at 6 o'clock. No, that's not happening. So I am so aware of this now. You are awake in living there. I can't imagine living there I'd be seeing it everywhere. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm assaulted. Like
it was very, I mean, I left.
Yeah, you did.
And actually,
you traveled.
It was interesting because the very last thing I sort of had with Hollywood was a producer friend of mine asked me to just do some freelance work for him. And he flew me to several film festivals, and we're talking like he's producing like $100 million movies, and just sort of sitting in on some of these conversations. And I was like, I've never been as unhappy as I was in Cannes, but also conversely, I was reading my favorite esotericist, Lawrencey, at that same time. So it was like the two worlds were like, could not have been more opposite. And then after that, I went to India, and it was like, I felt at home. So I knew what I needed to do, and that was it. I was done with Hollywood.
I so admired you. I still admire you. How well, first of all, you were traveling the world and you wrote stuff, you blogged, and you got out of Hollywood, and then this whole pandemic, you were in India, like you went for yoga training, and then you came back, and then you went to Goa. Yeah. So you've been in Goa the entire time.
Yeah, I was in Goa up until beginning of September. And I really felt the universe protected me in that. I'm a Scorpio. I get into things really intensely. I'm also very energetically open. So, I mean, there's no way I would have been influenced. Like I'm very deep in my knowing, but at the same time, like if I had been in a city, like my previous partner he lives in London. If I'd been in London, I might have really lost my mind. But I got to be in this protected space around beautiful, like awake hippies where we weren't really affected. Like I was still closely tracking everything. Like I knew exactly what was going on. And I mean, it was kind of the joke, like people were like, you should host some group meetings about everything that's going on. Like I was the go-to person if anyone had questions about the pandemic.
Did you have a lot of people reaching out to you?
More the people that I've met along the way in the last 4 or 5 years, because I felt like when I started traveling, I was attracting into my life everyone that I needed. Like I needed to cross paths with. I was in such alignment, right? So I'm still talking with all of these people. Like one of my girlfriends is in Australia, and it's like I am the first person that she will call if she has any questions related to this, because she knows that I'm just like, I do such deep research into it. So it's but yeah, as far as like LA people, I haven't even, and maybe it's not so much cowardice. It's just like, it's not like my life anymore. So I haven't really, like, I don't use Facebook anyways. Like I haven't even bothered. That might sound bad, but it's like the people, my group, my circle is entirely different now. So like sometimes I'm still having it in my head. And I don't know if you listen to the Cosmic Matrix, Bernard Gunther and Laura Matsu, they're amazing. Super cool people, but like they're very much outspoken. It's like you need to be outspoken. But then my partner's like, what is the point of like trying to convince people in LA that are so deep in the matrix? Like you're doing your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, at this point, I guess I kind of had the experience too, trying to convince the people that I still am close with, that I still do talk to, and like just seeing how there was nothing connecting. And I still, I mean, it's like with my family, and I still talk to them. I was talking to my mom the other day about not getting the third booster. Like, I'm still trying to convince them in whatever way I can. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have felt my own power is more in individual settings, right? In terms of like how to communicate. Like, I can read the person's energy. People are on different levels, right? So like for me to just come out on Facebook like guns blazing doesn't, that's why, in fact, this leads into why I started the COVID victims portraits, because it was like I wanted to do something that wasn't political, that wasn't that was coming purely from heart, that was not trying to tell you what to think or how to do or whatever. It was just like sharing something that's going on from like the most heart-centered place I could.
So going to these COVID victim portraits. So Amy, her mom is an artist. And I remember years ago, we had gone to for
Downtown
second
LA.
Thursday. Yeah, we went downtown LA because her mom had an exhibit. And at that time, Amy wasn't painting. And then she just, during her travels, or maybe when you were in India, you picked up the paintbrushes, and like, I've seen your art evolve like amazingly. So I've seen the whole journey. And she paints these amazing pictures, but she felt led to paint these portraits of these victims.
Well, essentially what was happening was I was really taking on just the heaviness and the pain of everything that was happening. And I had been closely following several Facebook groups. This was like right after the vaccine had been rolled out. Side effects groups, some of them that had gotten up to several 100,000 people, and then Facebook was axing them. So just censorship was already out of control at the beginning of this rollout. And was following COVID vaccinated, that subreddit, like was just very, because from March 2020, I knew that this was the plan, and I was very afraid of what this was going to mean. And I knew that a lot of my family and friends were going to be, taking it or coerced, whether they wanted it, whatever. So while I was watching all of this, and I felt so helpless, and I'm like, I just wish there was something I could do. Like, but what can I do from here in Goa? And then it just sort of came to me. I'm like, well, this is what I like. This is my passion, is painting portraits. Why don't I just do that and like just paint some of the victims and send them to the families? Like, I'm not charging anything. I'm doing it all for free. So there's no like incentive for me. It's been anonymous. So it's not like it's some kind of like platform for me to, it has nothing to do with anything like egoically for my art. That was the thing I was scared of at first. I was like, I don't want anybody thinking that I'm capitalizing off of people suffering. And of course, a couple of trolls initially tried to accuse me of doing that. And I was like, that's totally wrong. Like, if you knew the suffering I've been feeling over this past year, watching what's happening and just like the amount of helplessness, and then watching people be gaslit. And I have my own chronic illness, so I know what it feels like. It's already such a like isolating experience, but then to be told by all of your doctors, like when it's so obvious, like somebody has the second shot and they immediately suffer myocarditis or FND or any of these other things that are happening, and it's like they're still being told, oh no, wait, there's no connection. And I'm just like, this is horrible. Somebody needs to do something. And like, how do we raise awareness? How do we get it out there? Like, but without polarizing,
And there's still people, like you said, you had trolls. They're just like not willing to open their eyes and to really see what's happening. And it's become so politicized, and it's really not. It comes down to individual choice and which is being taken away from us. And the severe gaslighting, it's insanity. What some of these people, they thought they were doing the right thing by getting these injections. And for months, like you have that one young girl that has been through like dozens and dozens of doctor's appointments and tests and EKG, and they're shaking, they're can I say that word, neurologically challenged now. People have died after the doses, blood clots. Like there was a woman that took it for her work recently, Johnson & Johnson. She got a blood clot and died. And she is a mother of 2 kids. Like,
somebody from Extra
talking about it. No, nobody from Extra, not that I know of. I do know somebody that I used to work with. She had J&J, I think it was J&J, or Pfizer, and she's screwed up for life now. But the media is not highlighting this. And just before we dive more into that, I'm going to give some recent VAERS data that I pulled. And this is recent VAERS data from December 14th of 2020, when the vaccines first got rolled out, to September 24th, 2021. And so VAERS is a vaccine events reporting system where doctors or people are supposed to, like victims are supposed to like report to, but a lot of doctors don't even report stuff. So less than 1% is reported. So whatever these numbers are, they're projected to be 10 times higher. Now, this is directly from the CDC.
10 times higher anywhere.
Yes, 10 times higher, because they're just not reporting it. And it's from the freaking CDC and the media, the government. They're just ignoring it. And there's severe injuries happening. So the data from recent VAERS is there's been 752,803 adverse events. Now, this is just the one that's reported in the USA. And some of them, they might have been somewhere else, but it's the United States citizens that have been injected here. So that's how many adverse reports after the COVID vaccine. 15,937 deaths. And when this was reported, it was an increase of 551 over the previous week. And then there's been 105,758 serious injuries. And of the 72,215 US deaths, 11% occurred within 24 hours and 16% within 48 hours. 29% had onset of symptoms within 48 hours. Now, the crazy thing is starting to inject 12 to 17-year-olds, where they have like they can survive this. Like, that's what happens, is like their survivability is so high.
Survive this. It's like 99.97%.
Yes. And they're being injected. And the thing is, okay, here, honey, they're telling us to take the vaccine. They're not doing the research. There's no long-term studies. And you can inject young boys are getting myocarditis and their heart inflammation. They're having heart attacks. So you're damaging their hearts for the rest of their life. Once it's damaged, it doesn't heal. It's
one remark I want to make on that, that historically 50% of people who suffer from myocarditis die within 5 years of that initial diagnosis. So when the when the government says, "Oh, but it's mild, it's not a big deal," does that sound like not a big deal to people, especially when we're talking about young teenagers having myocarditis? Like, this is, it's absolute insanity.
I don't understand it. And I'm hearing something, I think I heard that 56% of the kids are injected. Who are these parents? I don't have kids, but I'm watching.
I like the numbers that they're saying of the percent of people who got.
You think it's less? I hope so. I hope parents are really protecting their children. And the thing is we don't know what it does to fertility. So all these young women and boys, the testes and their ovaries, they could become infertile. There's no long-term studies. And now they're pushing to inject
babies.
Babies 5 years old and up, like these beautiful babies that's what they do. They touch things, you sample things, you get it, and then you recover from it. There is absolutely no logical sense for this. And then they're introducing their boosters, like now J&J, which is a one shot. Now there's a booster, and there's absolutely no studies, long-term studies. And there isn't a booster shot, because what's happening is these vaccines aren't working.
It's so obvious, but the problem is this isn't about logic. This isn't about rationality. James Lindsay calls it like pseudo reality. So it's a cult mindset in which, and this goes back to the like propaganda and like the black magic, like this occult. You could show all of the stats in the world that show how obvious this is. Israel, Seychelles, Italy, all the mass vaccinated places are having huge rises in all their COVID cases. It's not working. People don't care. They are so invested in this narrative, and it would be so shattering to the ego to have it, to start to question it for so many that are in it, right? Matthias Desmet does a really good job. I don't know if you've seen any of his videos, but he calls it mass formation. He's a clinical psychologist, and there's historic precedents for what's going on, just in terms of like, yeah, if you like Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd, like there's so many good books from the last 100 years.
I'll have to get some of those from you, and put some in the show notes too. But there's also like, I haven't been indoctrinated by news in years, and I've mentioned this before. I don't watch mainstream news. Way before I knew anything, I just didn't like the way it made me feel, and just like I didn't want to feed into that collective consciousness. But there is electronic modification frequencies, and it's been patented, and that's what comes through the TV screen. So a lot of these people literally are hypnotized, and it's in the videos. And do you ever notice when you detox, like get away from social, like, because the only way I see my news is through social or through Telegram and stuff, and where people aren't going to be, where there's not that whole controlled narrative, how much better you feel, like how you like, I used to go into the fear mentality because I'm like, oh my God, what's going on in this world? These idiots, all that Biden like that, let's go, Brandon.
Canada just banned that from being said.
Oh my God, I know. Like, what happened to free speech? Like, literally, you can't say that in public spaces. Like, what is this? And that's the thing, is the people that don't know what is happening in Australia. If you see what they want to try to make happen here, look at Australia, and then Canada is the close second. There is
all the
no
Five
freedom
Eyes
anymore.
countries. Yeah, it's gonna get worse before it gets better, but it will get better.
Yeah, I believe it's gonna get better.
But it might be like 2025. Like 2025 is a big year in terms of like the esoteric cosmological cycles. So, and just some of the astrological stuff that's coming. So let's see. We just gotta, hold strong, hold the line.
Do you find out that in Vedic astrology, or what can I do? Because I'm consuming everything to keep me higher. Because I like literally last year, I was like, oh my God, what do I do? They're gonna come get me. Now I'm back into this like, okay, I'm looking down at all this nuttiness and observing it, and just knowing that, at the end, that the light is going to prevail over all this darkness. And it's like holding the line.
Yeah, it will. I mean, there's just been even like Renee Guénon, who was one of like the first people that I was like voraciously reading, and I read all of his books. There's like, I don't know, 20 of them, and one of them was symbolism, the cross. That was the thing that opened my mind to the whole idea of symbolism, right? And like everything. And then he has one on where he goes into the astrology, and he talks about 2025 as being this turning point at the end of the Kali Yuga. Right. So Hindu cosmology has these 4 yuga cycles, and you start in the golden age, it's 4 legs of Dharma, then the silver age, 3 legs of Dharma, then the bronze, and then Kali Yuga, it's like literally just 1 leg of Dharma left. So everything has gone backwards, everything's inverted. And some Hindu cosmological cycles put that we're actually in the bronze age and like already on the upswipe. But according to Guénon, who I really trust his, I mean, none of us should be trusting authorities, but as far as his level of understanding, and he said that it was 2025, and that if you look at the Yuga cycle in terms of the astrological, like the 26,000 year cycle, and then the last one starts with Krishna, like around 3,100, and then it's that cycle until the end 2025, and that lines up more or less with the Mayan calendar. It's off by a factor of 12, 13 years, but he's like, the way that he describes it, it's like it kind of started in 2012, right? And then it's not like it's just one day, one event, December 21st. It's like, it's what we're seeing now. Like, even I knew that something really big was going to come in 2020 because of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that happened January 12th of last year, right? And it wasn't that it happened right on that date, but it was like all of the pieces were like in formation. I mean, we already had rumblings of Corona. It didn't really get announced, I think, by the WHO until January 20th, but it's like, it's the larger picture that we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a novice in astrology, so I can't tell you. I follow people who've been doing this for 25, 30 years. There's a man named Philip Lindsay. He has a site called Esoteric Astrologer. It's unreal. Also, the Bailey books, into esoteric astrology. Like, there's so many levels to it. It's so far beyond my comprehension, but I can see just like the general way things are moving. There's another tip for your viewers. Rune Soup, Gordon White. He brings on a guest, Austin Coppock, who's a really great astrologer. Each year they do 2 sessions. They are so dead on. I've been following this for like 5 years. Go listen to it. It'll tell you everything you need to know. November is going to be intense.
What is the name of it? I'm going to write that down right now.
Rune Soup, Rune Soup.
Okay.
Yeah, he's down in Tasmania.
And it's so amazing how accurate all this, because you think, oh, what just you see in the back of a newspaper and your horoscope, which is just Western, that's just not even like the Western astrology is such a small part of it. And when you go into like, I tried to understand like there's the yogis, and then there's the ascendant, and then there's the, I think you introduced me to
transits, and yeah, it's so much more.
I think you introduced me to Astrology from the Soul on set, and I read that. Which has to do with the North Node, and I'm North Node in Pisces. And I was like, oh my God, that's like me, because it has to do with your emotional and your past life and your purpose. And I was just like, I consumed that. I'm like, oh my God, like it's very accurate. And people have been using it thousands of years. It's just in modern times. It's like, oh yeah, well, conspiracy, or that's like,
Yeah, this sort of a way to dilute it, to distract you, to discredit it. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, your cosmo horoscope is absolute bullshit. But if you understand energies, and like the way I like to present it to people is, when you walk into a room and there's another person in the room, you immediately get a sense of the energy going on, right? Like, they have their own energetic imprint. Whether you are clairvoyant or not, you can sense it. Now, think about the energetic body of a planet, right? Like, a planetary consciousness is much higher than our own individual human consciousness. And so then you've got these other planetary bodies that are out there, and they have influences. They have energetic imprints that are happening. And the less in control of your own faculties you are, the more these will impact you, right? So, another good example is the moon, like how women are synced to the moon and the moon cycles. And the more I get like open, just like the 3 days around the full moon, I cannot sleep. Like, it's like it's so strong now.
And the new moon too. Like I wake, I'm like, I couldn't sleep. I had the light sleep, and then I look, I'm like, let me see what the moon's doing. I'm like, that's why. Yep. Did you see it? Like last night, I was just looking out my window. I think it's full here on the 20th. But it was huge, and I'm watching the clouds go over it. It has that halo around it right now. And I saw someone else post something like that, the moon and that halo. She's like, I'm like, what does that mean? But yeah, I'm very I'm tied to the moon, feminine energy.
Oh yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that.
We can come back and talk about more, because there's so many things that we've lost coming into this modern era, and these times, like, all the natural medicine and homeopathy. I can't say these words. Yes, all the natural medicines and healings and all these rituals and communities and things that brought us together. Like, Western civilization is separating us from each other, and we're all connected to this divinity. And these shots, everything that's happening, the division, the racial, the vaxxed and unvaxxed, it's separating us from each other. And I always talk about unity. We need to come together, and all these new communities are being formed now, like all these awakened people like yourself, all these freedom fighters. Like, it's this huge family that's fighting for our rights and sovereignty, and like returning to this new earth, which we really need, because we can't continue on like this, like the Rockefellers and the and like big pharma and big tech. Like, it's out of control. And I think Kennedy is the one that said this, about how there's a plot in this great nation to enslave every man, woman, and child. And that's happening now. Like, it's coming to fruition now, and we see it, and so many people are asleep.
Yeah. And I mean, I had the luxury of not only waking up in 2015, 2016, but also having the job that we had gave us so much time. And even on set, I would be consuming things. So it's like consuming tonight, I would be absorbing all of this old literature. So like, I feel like what I can do is provide people with, because I have a very good memory. So it's like, I've read so much stuff. I've listened to so much stuff. I've had the chance to really dive in, you know, read books and books on virus theory and all of this stuff. And it's like, I can point you in the direction. And that's why I was saying, what I was saying earlier, it's like, the individual, like seeing where the individual is at, how, like what they might benefit from, because there's so much out there. There's so much information, you know, and it's like, yeah, it's really overwhelming. But the main point is what we were doing before wasn't working. We don't want to go back to that old normal. The old normal was toxic. The new normal is even more toxic. Our new vision of the earth as something, what all these awakened people are starting to create, that is where we want to move to. So we just really have to like keep that every single day in our heart and like focus on that, while we also pay attention to what's going on, you know, like we can't spiritually bypass any of that other stuff. But I think and I've suffered from this too, just like getting really depressed and like not seeing a way out of it. But then also like the light always comes back.
And like you said, people have to be ready for it. You can't wake them up. You have to just, you kind of take them by the hand and lead them in the direction of, you know, down the path of, you know, show them the light, like lead them down the path to the light. So for you yourself, what people that are just starting to awaken, I mean, you gave some of the pointers there for, you know, the information and books are there. What's one of the biggest things you can tell to someone that's like, okay, I'm seeing things just aren't right. Things just aren't adding up, to, you know, guide them towards full awakening?
So, oh man, there's so many different good sources on this. In terms of the COVID situation, I think Charles Eisenstein has done a really good job. He had that 3-part thing about like mob mentality, and there's like a lot of resources in there. For me, one of the books that was really instrumental right at the beginning was E.F. Schumacher's, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name of it right now? Hold on. It'll come to me. Oh, A Guide for the Perplexed, which is a play on the old Maimonides' The Guide for the Perplexed, right? Which was like a Jewish text written back in like the 1300s. But it's short, it's like 150 pages, and it just does such a beautiful job of like questioning some of our assumptions. And it's like a gentle introduction into the world of esoterics. And it just lays out some things where it's like, we don't have any explanations for that. But if you start to consider a different worldview, then there starts to be explanations, right? And actually we have all of the ancient wisdom is there. It has been revealed to us. We have texts and texts and texts that are like describing it. Although what it really is, you don't need any of those texts to find it, because it's already within each of us. Like we have, it's intuitively in us. We know it. If you think back as a child, and like I had some of these, like I knew that I was connected to every other person. I knew that if I just tuned in enough, I could like communicate with another person, right? I knew there was past lives. Like I knew all this stuff, and then it gets kind of beat out of you. So if you can just remove all of the conditioning. But yeah, I would say that book, A Guide for the Perplexed, amazing start. There's just different, like, it depends if you're a more intuitive person, something like Gigi Young, who is a total channel. Do you know her?
God, you're introducing me to all these new people.
I know. These
I'm
are like
a little behind in the awakened train, but what is her name? Gigi what?
There's different things, like even like Brene Brown. Wow, I know.
Oh,
you,
yes.
yeah,
of course.
Something like that. So it's like there's the self-work aspect, and then there's the worldview aspect. And both of these things are equal, like in my mind, equally important, right? Because the worldview will help position us, right? What we have going on right now, the general consensus is a materialistic view, and we have to break that, because it's incorrect. It doesn't take into account consciousness, anything else. This is why I love India, because India has never had that like materialistic view. Their culture is based on consciousness. That's why it's kind of a mess, like in terms of like their their whole system, because they don't care that much about, like, the emphasis is on spiritual development. It's not on gaining things, although that has changed in the last 100 or so years. But in the West, it's like very scientific, materialistic, but to such a fault. Like, it only takes the 3D world as what is. So we need to break that idea. And there's so many good resources to get you questioning, you know? Just like, even think about genius. Like, this was the thing that really helped me, was like, what explains those levels of genius that happen, right? These advanced souls that come onto our planet that just are such, you feel it. It's an old soul, right?
They're literally just opening up and receiving and
They're
trusting.
opening up and receiving. They've had
Empty
all these
vessel.
other lifetimes to like develop these tools, right? So to me, like, the key to everything is reincarnation. Like, without that basis, it's very difficult to get into a spiritual aspect, because then you can't really understand karma on the levels at which it's operating, right? So, I mean, you can also look at it from like an animist point of view too, where it's like there's consciousness in everything. And that's another thing. We look at things as if they're dead. The rocks are not dead. The wood is not dead. Nothing is dead. It's just how awakened is the consciousness. So obviously in a rock, the consciousness is totally asleep, right? But then you get a plant and something coming out of that. There's like a life that is happening that's a little more like awakened. And then you have an animal, and especially the animals that we've domesticated, because we've been so close in contact with them. We're like giving them, you know, more of our like higher intuition as well. All the animals are incredible. Like I love, like, that's why I'm a vegan, because I just love animals. But and then you get to humans, and like humans, wow, like look at how far our consciousness has come, but it's still almost nothing. So then why would we think it stops with us, right? And that's the question that E.F. Schumacher asks. It's like, why do we think that we are the end of development? So then you have to realize that there's higher consciousness still, and beyond that. And then you have the whole divinity. And this is why every ancient wisdom tradition points to Brahma, God, the all, whatever, you know, there's no word for it, because it's everything. It's all that it is, and all that is unmanifested. And that is so far from our comprehension right now, but that's what we need to get into. So, and actually what's beautiful is once you're really following that line, it can help with all of this other stuff that's happening right now on the egoic and 3D plane, because it really puts things in perspective. And my favorite esotericist says, treat this lifetime as one day in a 500-year life. Because like, if you look at your incarnation cycle, like, we need to put it into perspective, right? Like, we're all going to reach it eventually. We're all going to become the divine, like on the level that our soul seeks for. Like, we seek to merge with the divine, right? And that's why we feel empty. That's why we start the path. Some people aren't even aware of the path yet, but they're still on it, right? They're on, like, everyone's on the journey to awakening. It's just different places where we're at.
And knowing that you're not separate, that you're connected and all, like, that's what Jesus taught us, is that, you know, the kingdom of heaven is within. And the people in power, of course, bastardized his message and tried to, of course, the politics back then, to control the masses. But his message was as beautiful as well. And I think it's very Eastern in his message. Yeah. And it's just showing that you don't need to go anywhere to contact the divinity. Like, it's that you have access to it all the times. We are so powerful beyond our comprehension. So, and that's what he showed us. Here's what we all can become. This is like, here, we can walk on water. When you connect and get out of your own way and allow, you know, spirit to move through you, we're capable of anything. So
yeah, and there's so much beautiful, deep wisdom in Christ and and if we can like get into the symbolism of it, stop taking it literally, but like really understand what he is trying to say. Yeah, the kingdom of God is within. Like, we just need to find it within each one of ourselves has it. So I love that you bring that up, because and it's been really interesting to watch as obviously parts of the Christian community are falling in line with the mainstream narrative, but then like on my page, so many of the people who follow me are like Christian faith-based. And I think it's really beautiful, because they're really following Jesus. and Jesus' teachings, as opposed to the Pope, the church, this structure, this man-made structure that is trying to yeah. Years and years ago, I remember listening to a rabbi on Krista Tippett's show On Being, which I haven't listened to in probably 6 years, but this rabbi was saying how it doesn't matter which faith that you're in, as long as you go into it so deeply, into the heart of it, because they all have that wisdom of truth. Like the truth is in there, but it's been so covered and buried by all of the, the external agendas. But yeah, if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim,
it all has the same message, really.
Buddhist, yeah, all of it comes back to the same thing. It's just, we have used language, we have used symbols to try and describe something that is ineffable. And so whatever, these are just tools to help us realize that.
You know, what's interesting is I was raised Catholic as a kid, and I'm grateful for the foundation, but I always took it as oh, that's a story. I did, the word for word. I've never been one to believe all that, but it's interesting whenever they talked about the Pope or the cardinals, or if I'd go to a church and I'd see popes and cardinals, I never really, I loved Mother Mary. And of course I love Jesus. But, and Mary Magdalene,
Yes.
but the popes and the cardinals, I was like, ooh, these are people what are, and these cloaks, and they have all this, I've been to the Vatican. I've been all this money and wealth that's in there, and all our treasures are in their archives. And now I know. I look at the Pope, I look at his red shoes, and I look at how he's saying it's your duty. God wants you to take this vaccine. It's oh boy, God, you're sold out. You're a bad Christian if you don't take this shot, which is
the literal
against
mark of the beast.
Yeah, literally
our faces.
Yes.
060606. I mean, all of it. It's just so dark. That one cardinal though, that's so awake. I forget his name. It starts with a V. Have you been following him? He's written some of these essays and
yes,
to the Pope.
The one where he was supposed to have written The Last President. That one, the one that wrote.
Yes.
Oh my God. The last president. I don't want to say it. I voted for him. God, it is better than what's in the reptilian that's in the White House right now. So
I get it. I so get it.
It's crazy town. It's crazy town. And we're only 10 months in. Wow. So, but yeah, kind of seeing what I can't even listen to that person talk. But just really seeing it, it's insanity. All right, we don't need to get into the politics parts, but it's just you watch it and it's they can't even talk. What is going on here? And the media is not doing anything. The media is complicit in it all. I can't wait till everyone gets taken
videos and been listen to this man. He has dementia. It's very clear. He can't even read off of a teleprompter. And they're just oh, he's just nervous speaker. And I was how do you get that from watching this? Especially the Don Lemon thing where he's have you been vaccinated? And it's and then he goes off on the aliens and everything. And
yes. Oh my God.
The leader of the free world. Okay.
Yes. And then he does the whispering, and there's just one I posted. It's so funny where he starts Fuhrer. There's one with a, Adolf Hitler mustache. He's Fuhrer, Fuhrer. Ah! And everything he said has been a lie. And we saw that going in. Now, I know people that are already regretting their vote, and, they've seen the light, but we saw it going in. We were trying to warn people had such hatred for this person that the media helped turn everyone against. And now here we are. But I guess if it's supposed to play out, get the popcorn, it's a movie, and see it for what it is, and hold your seats, and don't give up your body sovereignty, which a lot of people are doing, and seeing what's happening, that you're painting all these portraits. People are being gaslighted. They're not talking about these things. Fire departments, all the frontline workers, the healthcare workers, the border patrol. I just saw a police officer that had to say he did it on his CB in Washington because they're not allowed to say goodbye to everyone. Fire department, they're getting rid of all these people in a pandemic. And then there was some interesting statistic too. Florida's been opened up, and we've had 80 to 100,000 people at these sporting events, in Alabama and in Florida. Let's go, Brandon. And and COVID cases have gone down. Where is it? It's like 62 to 80% in Florida. COVID cases have gone down, and they're not talking about it. They're not talking about it. So I don't understand how this, every time I tune in, I'm like, how is this still continuing?
Well,
It's,
I mean, if you can't see that this is tyranny and this is a global totalitarian takeover by now, it's understandable within the first few months, maybe within in the first 6 months, but at some point you have to, like, you are now in a state of complete cognitive dissonance. You are not thinking for yourself, like, because it's very obvious what is going on. The absurdity of their narrative is just, but actually what Desmond talks about is that the more absurd, the better for this type of mass formation, because they have dug down, their heels are just like in the ground. Basically what he describes is there's free floating anxiety before all of this, and then you create even more anxiety in that initial trauma of like the lockdowns and the fear, just the level of fear that you're going to die, right? Like they had done a bunch of research and they had realized that fear of a pandemic is like, or fear of some kind of bodily virus, bacteria, is like the number one thing to get people to turn over their rights. And so then they give you some, like, then they step in as the savior and they give you something to rally around. So people who had no meaning in their life are now being told that they are heroes and that this is what they need to do, and they will sacrifice everything for it. They don't care about anything else. They don't care about how the lockdowns are affecting people. People would be like, why aren't people wearing masks in India? When I would like post an Instagram thing, I'm like, because people in India are fucking starving on the streets. Like, are you kidding me? People have more important things to worry about than your like privileged little like middle America like ability to support yourself. Like, I'm sorry, 1 million people in India die of tuberculosis every year. Do you care about them? No, you don't. You only care. It's like single-minded, only focus on one thing. And it's all a psychological game. And once we understand this, and that the goal is a totalitarian takeover with a technocratic bent that is meant to enslave humanity into materialism, then it all makes sense. Otherwise, you're just going to continue grasping at straws and like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? All of the global governments worked in tandem. This is an orchestrated event. There is so much history that shows how this was planned. Just take the time, do the research. If you need anything, message me. I will give you all of
Yes. And as recent as like the simulation that happened in 2019 in the fall. Yep. Hi.
Hello.
It's so crazy, people. Like,
watch
really, when we
Pandemic.
say yes, the Pandemic, watch 1 and 2. And that's a really nice, that's a really good first introduction to it all, and following the money trail. And people still debunk it. Like, it's not debunkable. Like, all the sources, just like CDC, VAERS data, it's right there. It's not conspiracy. It is such plain sight. Once you open your eyes, you'll never close it again. And people like myself and like Amy, and it's so important to have community, to have like-minded individuals to help you through this awakening, because what is happening out there is so obscene. And like Amy said, it's been planned. Like, you need somebody to help you. You need your own sources to help you wrap your head around it. I've always had people that were like-minded. So, most of my friends that I'm close with, they haven't been vaxxed and they're on the same standpoint. So we share, we're constantly on a thread talking to each other. And I think it's going to get a little more bumpy or rougher because they're trying to vaccine passport and take our rights away. But it makes no sense that we're injecting our healthy bodies, or people that have already had COVID and they have natural antibodies. I mean, you don't get injected if you've had the chicken pox. Like, you're not going to take the chicken pox vaccine. And just like, I have a healthy body, like, I'm not going to go get chemotherapy just in case I get a cancer. So,
well, there's so many ways in which this just goes against all of our all logic, all of our science up until this point. All the definitions have changed. Like, it's all propaganda at this point. So yeah, but what
and the sad part
is super, super important about finding community and like-minded people. And there are so many people I know, because people reach out to me on my Instagram, that are suffering alone in silence. And the number one advice I give them is find some other people that think like you in your community, because it's not enough to just be online. Like, you need people face to face. You need to feel that power. The other day, 6 of us women gathered around another female friend of mine who's been quite ill, and the power in that room all of us on the same page, all of us there for
Mm-hmm.
her healing. Wow. There's nothing quite like
Mm-hmm.
that. So, um, Freedom Cells, if you're in the US, Derek Brose's project, there's just reaching out and finding, being a little bit more vocal about how you feel so that it doesn't mean that you have to come shouting out, but there are ways that you can signal to people, right? If you're in a place that's still masked up, don't wear the mask. See who, see who you end up interacting with. And what's really beautiful about this time is that, like, because the veil is so thin and being lifted, that like when you meet somebody who's like in your soul tribe, it just like so quick,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can just feel it. It's like you don't even need to say anything. It's like, oh, I get you. We understand each other. So it's
Mm-hmm.
as dark as it is, there's some really amazing things that are coming from this.
For sure. It's like the Hunger Games, the symbolism. You see another person in a grocery store and you're like,
Yes.
yeah, walking outside. Like that's where I draw the line is outside. Inside, of course, I acquiesce. I go in with the mask. But when it comes to like these places that like Portland doesn't have vaccine passports yet, but places are asking for vaccine status. I'm like, okay, I'll never go to that place again. I'll never go to that place again. That's modern day segregation. It's like drawing your lines. Like, where is your line in the sand going to be drawn? Do it.
And
Draw the
this is
line.
actually an interesting conversation too, and one that I've gone back and forth in my own head about, like from an ethical standpoint. But what I've come to in terms of the vax pass, and if you are considering getting one that is maybe not legitimate,
Mm-hmm.
which is a question I think a lot of people have, and or even like where to draw the line. So it's really nice to think I'm never going to take a PCR test. Well, what if your parent in another country is dying and you need to go care for them? Like sometimes there's
Mm-hmm.
things that are more important than like taking a stand, but it's weighing each
Mm-hmm.
of those things at the moment, right? So in that same scenario, your dying parent in another country, you need this vax pass to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I think ethically it is totally okay to find a way around that. On the other hand, if you're doing that to go to a sporting event, like get your priorities
Yes.
straight.
Right.
So yeah, if you're in a country where you need it to get groceries and feed yourself, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's
I agree.
yeah, it's a really interesting time, like on an ethical level. But I think if somebody, who is it? Max Egan in Australia says, like, in the Australian law, if somebody is attacking you, you have the right, legally protected right, to return that and add 10%. So if somebody comes
Mm.
at you with a knife, you can't use a gun necessarily, but you can definitely like knife them back, right?
Mm.
So when you basically, self-defense is totally ethically fine. So we just be really smart about what you're doing and
Mm-hmm.
hold the line. But we can't be perfect in this, right? Like I was feeling really strong about not taking any PCR tests, but we had to take one to
You
move,
have to.
and I got a home one and I spit on it. Right?
Oh, so you can. Okay, because I
Hope I don't
haven't
get
had to have a
arrested for
PCR
like
test because they were shoving the stuff up to your. Why does it need to go to your blood-brain barrier all the way up your nose? If we're wearing these masks, shouldn't it be like in the little
Great
inside of
question.
your nose? So I even had to do it once. So I haven't been traveling internationally because I don't want the hassle coming in and out, and I don't want to travel to a country where like Bali. I had to cancel a trip there because I was going to do a breathwork course.
Oh,
I was going to do a shamanic integrative process, and then I was going to go back like a couple months and do the training. And well, that had to be canceled because it was December 2020. And but just the fact of like the Balinese are so warm and friendly, and to go somewhere where they can't be themselves, where they're not allowed to be like, they're like, there's so many things a lot of these people in these other countries are going through with their own systems, their own freedoms, their own rights. So they're not even like, it's just not like true Italy or it's true Bali because they're being repressed. So if I do have to do international, I don't want to go to the brain blood barrier. So I know, I hope there's options. And then I just saw some advertisement for the COVID pass where they're going to take your blood every time, like, oh, it's a normal thing. You just prick your blood. We see, but they're going to be able to detain anyone for any reason. So people got to understand this isn't about health. It's about control and having everything on this.
biosecurity,
Yep.
transhumanist takeover.
Yes, yes. And we've seen what's in some of those vaccines and, they've sampled it. It's like, anyway, that's a whole, they're like, but it's not a rabbit hole. It's true. So just take the time, like we're saying, like Amy's saying, is just, there's resources out there. If you're in the beginnings of awakening, there's a lot of things that sources that you can go, and then you can go to and create community.
And the other thing, if you are awakening, it's very important to protect your own energy. Like, so a lot of the stuff we've talked about in this last hour, I wish that we could have just had a much more like loving and heart-centered conversation. But I mean, this is still heart-centered, but I wish that I've been working with a woman in this past year or two, and she's like, I wish that you could be going through what we're working on without all of the COVID mess and have it just be like just this totally joyous experience. Well, that's not what's happening in the collective. And that's okay. But Gigi said this, take some time to yourself if you're starting to feel overwhelmed. Don't feel like you need to figure it all out at once, and really show yourself like self-love in this process.
Compassion, and taking care of yourself first. Self-love, nurturing. You're going to be going through a lot, and it begins with yourself first, and then just open up little by little. And like Amy said, you don't have to figure it out all at once, because we don't need straight jackets.
Just find some balance in there. Doing the things that you love, being out in nature, your yoga practice, whatever it is, your art, I don't know, learning a new language, just stuff that that brings you joy, making sure that you're still doing that, because one of the things that the controllers are really trying to do is just take away anything that lights us up. And like I talk to a lot of people who just feel so depressed, and what's the point? And it's like gotta tap back into those things that we love.
1984. It's not all about the government. It's not going to get there. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. We kind of undulated through a lot of different topics, like Hollywood, the COVID shit show, all the gaslighted victims out there that are, the media is like steering people away, and all the brainwashing and all that. So, that's part of awakening out of this illusion in this matrix, and coming back to unity consciousness, and really, creating a new earth. And one of the last things I always ask my guests is, what does it mean for you to live with an awakened heart?
To me, living with an awakened heart is allowing all of the true expression of yourself to come through in every moment. So not closing off to whatever the experience is, whether that be a bright, loving experience, or whether that be grief and sadness and anger. Like, all of these things have a place. And so keeping that heart open, and not fearing what it's showing you, how it's guiding you.
So allowing and embracing, whether it's like something you deem negative or something you deem positive, it's all one and the same.
Right. And for me yesterday, I had a really, really hard day with some massive childhood wounding coming up. And I was in a state of panic, and it was like one of the darkest days I've had in a while. But then I really see it as like, wow, that's just one more opportunity that's pointing me in more healing to be done. And as horrible as it felt in the moment, it's like I allowed myself to really go there and just fall apart and break and see that darkness. And my best friend was like, I was like, I want to die. And she's like, meditate on that. And I like sat there and I was like, do I want to die? Actually, no, I don't want to die.
Keep going through those layers, and like, what is it about this that's real? Well, does this really, like is it Brene Brown that always goes through the layers? And
Katie, oh my God, Byron Katie, like
Byron Katie. That's
it's like, it's true. Is it true? Oh wait, coming back to yourself. And it's like, so just continuing to be vulnerable.
And isn't it interesting, at the time when there's a breakdown and grief? I had one a couple weeks ago, crying, walking through the woods, crying, and like hysterical crying. But there's a part celebrating always, like, and it ends up being such a wonderful day, because all those emotions that were stuck are being brought out to the light, and they're being processed. So there's always, like, I might be ugly crying, but there's a part of me like, yay, this is good. This is great.
Truly, because like we have, again, this is a totally different conversation, but we store, the body holds the score. The body holds all the trauma, and we have been taught to keep all that trauma in. And so we have a lifetime of things that need to be released. And it doesn't just happen in one session. Like it's an ongoing process. And each time we allow all those feelings and let them go, it's a lightness that we achieve, right? And it's like just one step closer to being our true selves. So, and and getting rid of those things that don't serve us anymore. So it's
a shift.
The work is never done.
Never done. Just having compassion with yourself through the whole process and remaining open. Yes. Well, Amy, thank you so much. It was so wonderful having you on.
Oh, so good, Nancy. I'm so glad to reconnect with you in this space.
I know we've been talking through Instagram or like Telegram. It's like, oh, like here you are. Hi. Oh, and throughout the last 2 years when all this nuttiness is happening. And I've known you for so many years and watching your growth as an artist and watching you like your travels and your writing and it's so good to like see you because I don't think I physically saw you since living in LA. Yeah. Yes. But anyway,
I hope to thank you again soon. You're welcome down here in Mexico anytime.
I just might take you up on that, get a little swab, and you can tell me where to take the test. So maybe I will come down there at some point.
Yeah, you don't need it to get in, so that's good.
It's just coming back out. It's like, what are they going to do? What are they doing? Oh, I'm TSA and global access, but it's a little wonky. But maybe this winter when it gets all yucky and gray and rainy.
So beautiful down here. You'll love it.
Okay. I think I might, because that might be one of my options. So probably be moving in the next couple months. I just haven't been inspired as to where yet.
Well, I have 2 girlfriends coming back to PAX starting on Sunday, coming to check it out where they want to relocate to. So yeah.
Oh, great. All right. Well, enjoy Mexico and I will see you again.
Love you.
Love you. Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Awaken Heart podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, head on over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback, you can reach me at the awakenheartpodcast.com.